Hello everyone. Today's topic I'm going to talk about is Buddhism faces the grief of loss. I guess some of you have lost someone important. In Buddhism, this kind of grief is called aibetsuriku in Japanese. It means the suffering of separation from loved ones. The suffering of separation from loved ones is the most painful thing. This suffering is said to make us grieve so much that no other suffering is worse than this. I feel like I still haven't admitted somewhere in my heart that he's dead. The time of my life has stopped when she died, and it's still not moving. I feel like I'm the only one who is being left behind, even though other people have started moving. Just as they say, the suffering of separation makes us sad for a long time. We would wonder, will this pain be healed someday? But it was the teaching of Buddhism that accepts and supports the human's inevitable suffering and grief. Traditionally, in Japan, when someone passes away, people listen to the sermon of Buddhism. I think so many people must have listened to the teaching of Buddhism and felt relieved and healed. So today, I'm going to tell you the teaching of Buddhism titled Buddhism Faces the Grief of Loss. Here are the contents of this video. First, Shogyo Mujo, the impermanence of all things. Second, Onnai, love and attachment. Third, Mujo no kaze, the wind of impermanence. Let's get started. Number 1, Shogyo Mujo, the impermanence of all things. Before you learn about the suffering of separation from loved ones, you need to understand these 3 Buddhist words. First, Shogyo Mujo means nothing is permanent. Shogyo means all of the worldly things. Everything doesn't last forever. Buddha said, this is the truth. Everything keeps changing. There is nothing in the world that doesn't change. My life also keeps changing. Things that happened last year do not happen this year. We have something this year that we didn't have last year. We don't have something this year that we had last year. Next year, we might not have what we have this year. Or next year, we might get what we don't have this year. Just like that, our time is flowing from last year to this year and next year. From last month to this month and next month. From yesterday to today and tomorrow. Nothing changes even for a moment. In Buddhism, this truth is called the impermanence of all things. In human relationships, this is also called eshajori, meaning that those who meet must part. Life is a series of encounters and partings. Some of you might be watching my YouTube channel for the first time today. We could say that you and I have met for the first time in life. Sure, this is through the screen, but we can still say that we met. Those who meet must part. If you skip this video, that will be a goodbye for us. Sometimes we part like this. Or if you decide to keep watching this channel, then we might continue our relationship for a long time. Still, there will be a time in life when we will have to say a goodbye. There would be unexpected goodbyes where people just disappear without a moment's notice. Or there would be huge, heartbreaking, emotional goodbyes like rejection in love. Or some people suddenly die of diseases or in accidents. In any case, one day we would have to part with everyone we met. This is inevitable. If somebody you hate leaves you, you might be happy. But if it's someone you love, you go through aibetsuriku, the suffering of separation from the loved one. This loved one is someone important to you, someone who has supported and strengthened you, or someone you loved. When we have to separate from such a person, or when our relationship does not last anymore, we suffer greatly at the time of separation. This suffering is called aibetsuriku, suffering of separation from loved ones. So, this suffering is inevitable. As long as we live as human beings, we can't live without experiencing this suffering because we live in such a world. Since we live in a world where all things are impermanent and the cycle of encounter and separation is repeated, no matter how important our family is, we can't get away from aibetsuriku, the pain of separation. The Buddha taught 8 universal human sufferings, and this is one of them. So, as long as we are humans, no matter where we live, no matter what political party we support, no matter how rich we are, and no matter how we live our lives, none of us can live without this suffering. Someone is suffering from it right now. Some people will suffer in the future, and others have suffered in the past. Humans have all experienced it in the past, thousands and thousands of years of history, and will continue to experience that. The suffering is unavoidable as long as we live. This is the truth. So, we can't avoid this suffering. Everyone must face the suffering someday. Buddha taught that this is what the suffering is like. When we face the separation, we feel like, I thought I was prepared for that, but how painful this is. Shinran Shonin wrote a poem about that. This is his poem. An encounter is the beginning of separation. There will be a time when we have to say goodbye to someone, no matter how important they are to you. Shinran Shonin had known this for a long time. Shinran Shonin became a Buddhist monk at the age of 9, so he was well aware of the impermanence of all things. Those who meet must part, and the suffering of separation from loved ones. And he taught people about these. So he knew there would eventually come a time when he would have to say goodbye to someone, no matter how important they were to him. But he didn't expect it to be today. That is what the poem says. I think he is not the only one who feels like this. Everyone would think like, I was prepared for the separation, but it happens too early. Even if we know this is the truth, we can't accept it. His poem expresses a grief like this. Number 2, on 9, love and attachment. I guess you want to know how to deal with the suffering of separation. Quite a few people say we would be better off not loving anybody. Some people say if you don't love, you won't have to suffer even if you have to leave someone. Love could also mean attachment and dependence. So they say you suffer because you are attached to someone. They also say if you are attached to no one from the beginning, you can live in peace even if someone dies. So you shouldn't be attached or dependent. Just live without loving anyone. Certainly, this is true in a sense. The smaller the feeling of love you have, the smaller the suffering you experience. If you don't love someone very much, you can quickly accept the separation. The bigger the feeling of love you have, the bigger the suffering you experience. So, if you are still in the depths of grief, saying, time has stopped in my life since the death of that person, I can't move even one step forward from that time, when others have already started moving. You loved and cared about him or her very much. The fact that others were able to move on, but you were still devastated by the loss of the person, is a sign that you had a strong support for the person. The pain and sorrow are so deep because you love the person so much. It is only when you lose someone that you realize how much you have depended on them for emotional support. I heard that when the power went out at night in Tokyo, it was so dark like never before, and they were surprised to see stars in the sky. It's hard to tell when the lights are on, but when they are off, you realize how dark it really is. We can say that someone set a light in our hearts, that only when we lose them and it becomes completely dark, we realize how strong a light they were to us. We often notice that small things we took for granted were special when we lose them. So how much you feel sad and pain indicates how much you love the person. Then you may think you should stop loving so you don't suffer. But we can't help loving someone. We can live without depending on someone. We need and long for someone who supports us. This is how we are. We can say this is because of our blind passions or our desire. Humans can't stay away from such things. Shinran said, it is impossible to eliminate attachment, and birth and death will never end. Attachment here means a feeling of love or affection. Parents love their children, children love their parents. A husband loves his wife, and a wife loves her husband. This feeling is attachment. Even if we try to eliminate attachment, we'll never be able to do it. In Buddhism, birth and death means suffering. So this means sufferings will never end. We can't eliminate suffering no matter how much we try. We can't cease to love. So humans have to suffer all the time. Shinran Shoni said that suffering will never end. Shinran Shoni himself practices asceticism to eliminate attachment. Through his agonizing experience, he realized that attachment is very difficult to let go of. Since we can't help loving someone, we feel pain and grief when someone close to us dies. Birth and death will never end. Shinran Shoni said that suffering and troubles will never disappear. This is the reality of human nature. We live in a world where nothing lasts forever, and we can't live without loving others. No one can't get away from the suffering of separation from loved ones. Everyone must experience this sorrow. This is one of the sufferings that we have to undergo as long as we are humans. Number 3. 無常の風 The wind of impermanence. The suffering of separation from loved ones is inevitable. In the letter written by Renyo Shonin, known as On White Bones, he expressed his inexplicable feeling of helplessness. The letter continues like this. This is still in the middle of a letter, though. If the wind of impermanence blows, it would take us away before we know it. The wind of impermanence is the wind of death. If the wind of death blows, any person would die in an instant. We don't know when the wind of impermanence blows. Every single one of us has to die when the wind blows. When someone close to us dies in a car accident or something, this deep sadness makes us very angry. Why does my son deserve such a terrible fate? Why does my husband have to die? Then we would vent our anger on other people or a lot of things. But in a word, the wind of impermanence has just blown. Any person must die when the wind blows. It happens to all of us, sooner or later. The wind of impermanence is going to blow. The wind has already blown past the dead people. If that happens, then both eyes are instantly closed. The two eyes have closed and will never open. When the last breath is forever stilled, a person who used to breathe has stopped breathing forever. The radiant face is drained of life. A person alive has a good complexion. Such a healthy face turns into a cold face with the color of soil. Its vibrant glow is lost for good. A healthy face, just like a peach or a plum, turns into a dead person's face with pale, bloodless complexion. Although family and relatives may gather and grieve broken-heartedly, this is to no avail. The families and relatives of the dead person gather and grieve. They shake the dead body and say, "Why did you die? Say something! Open your eyes!" But of course, the dead body doesn't open its eyes or speak. They know there is no point in crying and shouting, and this will never bring the dead person back to life. But they can't help crying, because the dead person wouldn't move at all, even if they cried or shouted. They can't help crying even more. They wish it were a dream, but it isn't. They wake up in the morning and know that this isn't a dream. They realize even more that it isn't a dream, and the person has already died every time they wake up. Grieve broken-heartedly, this is to no avail. They can do nothing about this. I'm afraid there is nothing they can do about it. There is nothing else to be done. This means that they can just keep crying. They can't be sad forever. They have to prepare for a funeral and make a living. They can stay overwhelmed with sorrow. There is nothing else to be done. The once familiar form is taken to an outlying field, and when it has vanished with the midnight smoke, they have a funeral, carry the dead body to a cemetery, and cremate it. Nothing is left but white bones. The body becomes a pinch of white ashes in a cinerary urn. They would say, what he used to be isn't here. As the letter says, everyone is going to be a pinch of white ashes. This is indeed indescribably sad. What a sad existence humans are. No matter how hard we live, we are going to be a pinch of white ashes in such a small urn. What is the point of our lives? What have we lived for? The death of someone close to us makes us think a lot about it. That is expressed in the sentence here. This is indeed indescribably sad. These sentences were written in the Muromachi period about 500 years ago. This is something that is happening everywhere in the world even now. It has happened over and over in the past, and we are also going to experience it. In the future, hundreds and thousands of years from now, people will repeat this kind of sorrow. Buddhism teaches us that the reality of human beings is that we are constantly experiencing the suffering of separation from loved ones. People who had difficulty accepting the death of their loved ones have been listening to these stories at temples for a long time, and have gradually come to accept their grief and heal again. With all the sufferings, what is the point of being born and living life? Buddhism teaches what kind of happiness we must seek despite all the sufferings. Today, I talked about the suffering of separation from loved ones. I talk about the teaching of Buddhism on this channel. I talked about the suffering of separation from loved ones today. If I have an opportunity, I'll talk about the other sufferings. Someday, I would like to share with you the Buddha's teaching about true happiness to live for in the midst of all the suffering. Thank you for today.